You are basing your entire life strategy for freedom on a number invented by a group of German bureaucrats in the 19th century. Think about that. The age of 65 wasn't calculated by a team of doctors analyzing when your knees give out, and it wasn't determined by financial mathematicians optimizing your joy. It was picked by Chancellor Otto von Bismarck in the 1880s for a state pension program, back when the average life expectancy was barely 45. Essentially, the system was designed so that most people would die before they ever collected a dime. Yet here you are, 140 years later, treating 65 like it's a law of physics. You're convinced that if you stop at 62, you're reckless. But if you stop at 65, you're responsible. It is completely arbitrary, and it is trapping you in a cycle I call automotive Stockholm Syndrome. Here's how automotive Stockholm Syndrome works. You wake up early to drive a car you're making payments on, to get to a job you tolerate, just to pay for the car that gets you to the job. You're working to maintain the infrastructure that allows you to work. You are the hamster who has fallen in love with the wheel because you paid a lot of money for it. And the responsible plan is to keep running until the machinery of your body breaks down, at which point you are finally allowed to sit in a recliner. This creates a massive amount of anxiety. You stare at your 401k balance and wonder if you hit the magic number. You obsess over withdrawal rates, but you are missing the actual risk. The risk isn't that you will run out of money at 85. The risk is that you will run out of body at 66. Waiting until 65 isn't the safe bet. It is a massive statistical gamble with the only asset you cannot compound, which is your health span. The financial industry loves it when you work longer because they get to keep collecting fees on your growing pile of money. But the math of your biological reality breaks down the moment you wait too long. We need to have a serious conversation about the difference between lifespan and health span, because your financial planner is only calculating one of them. Lifespan is how long you have a pulse. Health span is how long you can climb a flight of stairs without needing a nebulizer. Modern medicine is fantastic at keeping us alive until we are 85 or 90, but it is not nearly as good at keeping us hiking, traveling, or surfing until 90. There is a concept in actuarial data called the disability cliff, and for a terrifying number of people, it hits right around age 66. This is the tragedy of the one more year mindset. It reminds me of Hiro Onoda, the Japanese intelligence officer who stayed in the Philippine jungle fighting World War II for 29 years after it ended because he didn't believe the war was over. He wasted decades fighting a ghost war. Most people looking at 65 are pulling a Hiro Onoda. You have already won the financial war. You have the money to survive. But you are still in the jungle, fighting for a paycheck you don't actually need, simply because you never gave yourself permission to surrender. Retirement experts break your remaining years into 3 distinct phases: the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. The go-go years are when you have the energy to travel, start businesses, or renovate houses. The slow-go years are when you prefer a cruise ship to a hiking trail. The no-go years are when you are mostly watching Netflix and going to doctor's appointments. Here is the kicker. Every single year you delay retirement past 60 is a direct withdrawal from your go-go account. You cannot deposit those years back later. You can't trade 5 no-go years for 1 go-go year. I see this constantly with men who have spent 40 years dreaming of buying a specific sports car. They finally retire at 67, they go to the dealership, they buy the Corvette, and then they realize they have to sell it 6 months later because their lower back hurts too much to get in and out of the driver's seat. That is the reality of waiting. It is the tragedy of finally getting the toy when you are too broken to play with it. You need to look at this through the Vitality Multiplier. If you retire at 65 and your health declines at 66, you bought yourself 1 year of prime freedom. But if you retire at 62, you get 4 years. That is a 400% increase in your prime vitality window. You are quadrupling the time you have to actually live. When you choose to work until the standard retirement age, you aren't just giving up time. You are giving up the best version of yourself. You are handing your employer the last of your energy and keeping the exhaustion for your family. But here is the thing that scares me even more than the physical decline. It is the psychological cliff that comes right after the biological one. We need to talk about retirement shock. This is a phenomenon that hits high achievers particularly hard, and the longer you wait to retire, the harder it hits. Right now, you probably complain about your job. You complain about the meetings, the emails, the deadlines. But you are underestimating how much of your serotonin and dopamine production is tied to that stress. You are the senior vice president of important things. People return your calls. You solve problems. You have a place to be at 9 in the morning. Your brain is wired to receive validation from your professional existence. When you wait until 65 to pull the plug, you are often at the peak of your professional identity. Then, on a random Tuesday, it stops. You go from being the person everyone relies on to being just Bob who watches daytime TV. The silence of the phone not ringing is deafening. Your brain chemistry takes a massive hit because you went cold turkey on the drug of professional relevance. This brings us to the neuroscience of adaptability. There is a critical window for reinventing yourself, and it starts to close the longer you stay in the grind. It is significantly harder to build a new social network, learn a complex new hobby, or start a new business at 65 than it is at 55. When you retire early, you still have the neuroplasticity and the aggressive energy to build a Chapter 2. You are young enough to be the rookie in a new game. But if you wait until 65, the neural pathways of your worker bee identity are so calcified that breaking them feels like a trauma rather than a transition. You become the guy who can't figure out who he is without a business card. I call this terraforming. In sci-fi, before humans live on Mars, they send machines to generate oxygen. They terraform the planet so it can support life. Your retirement is a new planet. You need time to terraform it before you land. If you work 60-hour weeks until the day you turn 65, you haven't planted the seeds of new friendships or interests. You land on the planet of retirement, and there is no oxygen. You suffocate. This leads to a counterintuitive reality about cognitive decline. People tell me, I'm working until 70 to keep my mind sharp. That is usually a lie. Unless you are a research scientist making new discoveries daily, your job is likely repetitive. You are solving the same problems you solved 10 years ago, just with different people. That isn't mental exercise. That is mental stagnation. The data suggests that retiring early to a life of active novelty, learning languages, navigating new cities, building things, is far better for your brain than staying in a high-stress, low-novelty career. We all know what happens when you don't have this outlet. You become the retiree who tries to run his homeowners association like a Fortune 500 company. I see this guy all the time. He is measuring his neighbor's grass height with a laser level and sending certified letters about trash can placement because he has all this pent-up executive energy and nowhere to direct it. He didn't terraform his life, so now he is terraforming the neighborhood into a prison. You might be nodding your head at the psychological risks, but I know exactly where your brain goes next. You pivot to the numbers. You tell yourself you can't leave yet because the spreadsheet says you aren't safe. Now, I know exactly what you are thinking. You're looking at your spreadsheet right now and saying, but if I work just one more year, I can add another $100,000 to the pile. That makes me safer. This is what we call one more year syndrome. And honestly, it is a mathematical disease. It is an obsession with a safety margin that has become so wide it is no longer a margin. It is a canyon you are throwing your life into. You are addicted to the accumulation phase because it is the only thing you know, even though the distribution phase is staring you in the face. Most people are terrified of longevity risk, the risk of living too long and running out of money. That is a valid fear, and we plan for that. But almost nobody talks about oversaving risk. This is the risk of dying with the richest cemetery plot in the county because you were too scared to spend a dime while you were alive. I see this constantly. People work jobs they hate until 68 to reach a net worth that statistically they couldn't spend if they tried. They are trading guaranteed miserable hours today for hypothetical luxurious hours in a future they might not see. The math says that if you have 25 times your annual expenses, you are safe. If you have 30 times, you are bulletproof. If you are working to get to 40 times expenses, you aren't building safety. You are working for free. you have to understand the diminishing returns of income. When you are 34, earning an extra $100,000 changes your trajectory. It buys the house. It secures the college fund. It stops the panic attacks. The utility of that money is massive. But when you are 64 and you already have a paid-off house and a healthy portfolio, earning another $100,000 has almost zero impact on your actual lifestyle. It doesn't make the steak taste better. It doesn't make the sheets in the hotel room softer. It just changes a number on a screen that you log into once a month. You are working for a high score in a video game that is about to be turned off. Imagine a bucket representing your financial needs. For 40 years, you have been holding a massive fire hose, your career, trying to fill this bucket. It takes effort. You are sweating. But here's the thing. The bucket has been full since you were 62, yet you are still standing there, gripping the hose, blasting water at a full bucket. The water isn't staying in. It is just splashing out and making a mess. You are tired and wasting water simply because you are too afraid to turn off the valve. Then comes the final excuse, the one that everyone uses when the math fails them. I am doing it for the kids. I want to leave a legacy. Let me be brutal with you for a second. That is a lie you tell yourself to avoid the identity crisis we just talked about. I have spoken to thousands of adult children of retirees. Do you know what they say? Not a single one of them says, I wish Dad had worked 3 more years so I could get an extra 50 grand when I'm 55. Not one. They all say, I wish Dad had retired earlier so we could have gone on that fishing trip before his hip gave out. Your kids would trade a slightly larger inheritance for a happier, more present version of you in a heartbeat. You are buying them money at the cost of your presence, and that is a terrible trade. You are working to leave them cash they will likely get when they are too old to enjoy it, rather than giving them the memory of a parent who actually enjoyed life. But even if you accept the math, there is one systemic excuse that stops most Americans dead in their tracks. I can hear you screaming at the screen right now. You are saying, this all sounds great, but I live in the United States of America. And if I quit my job before I turn 65, a single kidney stone will bankrupt my entire lineage. This is the golden handcuffs of healthcare. It is the single biggest psychological barrier stopping purely rational people from reclaiming their lives. And I am going to be very direct with you. If you are working an extra 3 to 5 years solely to keep your employer-sponsored health insurance, you are buying the most expensive insurance policy in the history of mankind. Let's look at the gap calculation. Say you are 62. You have the nest egg and the paid-off house, but you see that private health insurance costs $25,000 a year. You panic. You say, I can't pay that. I get it for free at work. So you stay. You commute. You deal with the stress. You work 2,000 hours a year. Do the math. If the only reason you are staying is to save $25,000, you are effectively selling your limited remaining life for $12.50 an hour. You are a multi-millionaire grinding out 40-hour weeks for a wage a teenager would turn down. You're valuing your freedom at $12 an hour because you are terrified of a line item. You need to reframe healthcare costs. It is not a barrier. It is a fee. It is a toll you pay on the highway to freedom. If you have a portfolio generating $80,000 or $100,000 a year, and you have to allocate $20,000 of that to healthcare for 3 years, that isn't a failure. That is the cost of doing business. You are buying your life back. You are writing a check to an insurance company so that you don't have to write a check with your time to an employer. Furthermore, you are operating under the delusion that once you hit 65, healthcare becomes free. It does not. You have Part B premiums, IRMAA, surcharges if you have high income, Part D for drugs, and Medigap policies. A comprehensive Medicare setup can easily cost $6,000 to $10,000 a year. So, you are working those extra years not to save $25,000, but to save the difference between private insurance and Medicare costs. You are staying in the prison of employment to save maybe 15 grand a year. It is madness. And here's the ultimate irony, the sick joke of the modern American workplace. I know people who stay in high-stress corporate jobs that give them high blood pressure, cortisol spikes, and heart palpitations. specifically so they can keep the insurance that pays for their blood pressure medication and heart monitoring. They are destroying the asset, their body, to pay for the maintenance of the damage they are causing by staying. It is a closed loop of destruction. If you retire early, you might find that your health costs actually go down because you have time to exercise, cook real food, and sleep more than 5 hours a night. You are treating the symptoms with insurance when the cure is quitting the job. This brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, which is about control. The financial industry loves to scare you with sequence of returns risk. This is the risk that the market crashes right after you retire, depleting your portfolio before it has a chance to grow. They use this to tell you to wait until 65 or 70 to be safe. But I would argue the exact opposite. Retiring early actually gives you more flexibility to handle this risk, not less. When you retire at 65, you are often stepping off a cliff. You have maximum expenses, you are likely forced to take required minimum distributions soon, and you have less energy to pivot. If the market tanks, you are stuck. But if you retire at 55 or 60, you have options. You are in the go-go years. If the market crashes the year you retire, you have the vitality to pick up a consulting gig, work part-time at a low-stress job, or adjust your spending because you aren't paying for medical issues yet. You can manipulate your income to do Roth conversions while your tax bracket is low. You are the captain of the ship, not a passenger. Debunking the Social Security maximization myth is crucial here. People tell me, I'm waiting until 70 to maximize my Social Security check. That is a bet. You are betting the government that you will live long enough to break even, which usually happens in your early 80s. The house often wins that bet. You are trading guaranteed years of freedom in your 60s for a slightly larger monthly check in your 80s, when you probably won't have the energy to spend it anyway. Think of the pilot analogy. You are flying a plane, your life. The fuel is your health. You are approaching the airport at age 60. You have plenty of fuel and the weather is clear. Your portfolio is strong. You are ready to land. But the control tower, society, your financial planner, radios in, no, don't land yet. Circle for another 5 years. It's safer. So you circle. You burn fuel. You do laps. Suddenly, 5 years later, you run out of fuel. Your health crashes. Now you have to land. But it's an emergency landing. You are crashing into retirement rather than gliding into it because you listen to a control tower that doesn't care if you run out of fuel. The stress of working those extra years is a compounding risk factor. Every year you stay in a job you tolerate is a year you are exposing yourself to the cortisol and sedentary lifestyle that leads to the very health events that prevent you from enjoying the pension you are waiting for. The safe bet isn't waiting. The safe bet is landing the plane while you still have the fuel to taxi to the gate and enjoy the vacation. You have to stop viewing your career as a safety net and start viewing it as a liability to your longevity. The market might recover if you retire at the wrong time, but your knees, your back, and your cognitive plasticity will not recover if you retire too late. Waiting until 65 creates a triple threat against you. Your health declines, your identity calcifies, and your wealth hits diminishing returns. You need to stop calculating if you have enough money to survive until 90 and start calculating if you have enough vitality to enjoy 70. Ask yourself, what is the true cost of one more year? Changing how you think is everything. If you want to learn how people who retire with $10 million think, watch this next video.